I've never had a good relationship with my father. He's never liked any of my boyfriends, or the fact that his son has had boyfriends to begin with. This point of contention is what led to our poor relationship, but I was his only child, so he never completely pushed me away. This is why I was the one who inherited the barn after his sudden passing. Speaking of the barn, an old wretched place, if you didn't live there, you'd have thought it was abandoned. Large vines, chipped paint, a cracked window to the basement. There's no doubt my father quit caring for the barn once I moved out. I'll skip all the boring details of paperwork, boring business talk, and all the driving. It was Saturday night when I finally got moved into the barn house. While my father didn't care about the outside, at least he kept the inside homey and neat. Quick layout dump. The house is 3 stories, not including the basement and attic. The house has the basics and more: a decently large kitchen, 2 dining rooms, a few office rooms, a large living room, a game room, a movie room, and plenty of bedrooms. I decided to move into the yellow guest room. Staying in the master bedroom would have felt just too strange. The yellow guest room was decently large. It had access to the green guest room, it had a closet, and it had a direct door to the attic. For the most part, the house was just as uneasy as I remember it being as a child. It never truly felt like a home. I felt like a guest in my own house. At least, I had the animals with me, especially Lucy, my dad's old collie who helped round up the few cows in the morning. Lucy is a good girl, always waiting for pets on the head, yet always tentative and respectful of boundaries. Lucy always slept on the bed at night. Nothing could get a dog to leave the comfort of the mattress. That's why I became terrified when every night she began sniffing at the door to the other guest room. Without fail, as soon as the lights went off, she would jump off the bed and endlessly sniff at the other door, as if somebody was trying to offer her something. That should have been my first sign to leave. The nights began to be more uneasy. I never went to bed without feeling eyes on me, but what scared me was when Lucy started to growl at the door. It wasn't any normal growl, it was a full-on snarl, as if she was getting ready to kill someone. Nights and nights of this endless snarling and no sleep, just snarling. I eventually had to keep Lucy out of my room at night, but even then, in the slight muffled silence of the night, I could hear the snarling. I decided enough was enough one morning when I woke up to still hear Lucy snarling. I opened the green room and as easily as Lucy went from calm to snarling, she went from hatred to complete fear. That door opened and her tail tucked between her legs as she scurried downstairs whimpering. I entered the room to see if an animal had somehow gotten into the room, but nothing. The room was empty, all but beds, dresser, and toy dolls that my dad had left behind. I decided to keep the door open to the green room after that. It seemed to stop Lucy's growling, but it also seemed to keep her from going upstairs. At night, she would follow me to the stairs and stop, staring up the large staircase, at the open room, all night. Every morning I would come downstairs, Lucy at the bottom of the steps. She'd catch a quick glance at me, then continue her wide-eyed stare. I still remember one night going to bed, turning off the lights and closing the door, hearing Peter Patter surprised that Lucy actually followed me to bed that night. I got into bed and so did she, licking my face as she used to and then settling right next to me. Finally, no snarling that night. I was actually able to sleep. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I was awoken by Lucy hurriedly jumping off the bed and to the door connecting my room to the green room. And as previous nights had, she continued that irritating snarling. It must have been 10 minutes before I decided it wasn't going to work out, and I had rushed to my door to go downstairs and get a drink. But I stopped in my tracks as I had gone to the steps. There, Lucy, at the bottom of the steps, as she had been there for the past few days. I looked back at my dark room, the shadows feeling solid, the darkness feeling as if it engulfed the room. I didn't go back to sleep that night. Apprehensively, I started to let Lucy sleep with me again, but it seemed as though her growling shifted to just staring at the door all night. At least I could sleep again. But things shifted. I no longer felt safe, even during daytime. What was once a feeling of comfort transformed into the feeling of being watched. Everywhere I went, eyes always watching me from the darkness. Every mirror felt off, as if I wasn't the only one watching myself stand in front of them. Never once did I feel alone in that house, as if a presence followed me into every room. The cows refused to go anywhere near the barn. It seemed as if when Lucy looked at me, she stared right over my shoulders, looking at something, constantly trailing me everywhere I went. This was only a month of living in the house, and things would only get much, much worse. Along with the farm and the house came 63 acres of land and a dock on the river. The woods in front of the river were a grim area. They held statues representing the miscarriages my mother had before she had me. Every week I had to attend to the dock, making sure it was clean and stable. Every day cleaning the dock, I could hear it whistling from the river, but no one in sight. After I cleaned the dock, I'd feed the kitchens and call Lucy back inside. Then I'd take a shower. As I got out of the warm shower, I got dressed and brushed my teeth. But I was overwhelmed with that feeling. It was coming back, the darkness, watching, always watching, no matter what. I looked behind me to make sure I was alone, but as I looked back at the mirror, I could swear I could see a slight outline of a man, only vaguely. The routine of taking care of this house became normal, but every now and then something broke the normality. Misplaced items, a broom that should be in the closet but was in the music room, the darkness always watching, movement out of the corner of my eye, never too sure what I saw but always chucking it up to Lucy. But then it started, the voices at night. They would start in the green room. Always at night, always. Constant whispering at the door connecting the two rooms. Indiscernible whispering. Sometimes frantic, sometimes demanding, but always incomprehensible. I would put my ear up to the door to hear what was being said, but it would always stop, and then resume once I was back in bed. Each night the whispering grew louder, until it sounded like people were talking in the green room, as loud as they possibly could. Then it just stopped as suddenly as it started, but it only stopped at night. While in the music room, I could hear the faint whispering coming from the walls. In the bathroom, I could hear people talking outside the door. It was never nice conversation, always indiscernible, but always frantic or demanding. The whispering would continue, but during the peace and quiet, I could always feel that whatever it was still there, with me, in the same room, always with me. I couldn't even feed the chickens or go near the cows. They'd always dart away. Even being outside wasn't safe from the voices. The whispering never followed. Something worse did. Much, much worse. In the distance, I could hear what sounded like a woman, shrieking for help. I would have gone to see who it was, if it wasn't the exact same voice repeating, "Help," in the exact same way over and over and over. The calls and shrieks never felt like they were genuine, rather something trying to lure me into the woods. Each night I took my shower and got ready for bed. Each night feeling eyes follow me from the bathroom to my bedroom. Each night hearing something from the green room. It's strange to think back now. The nights with peace and quiet became uncomfortable. I've grown used to the noise. They were comforting, more so than silence. That's why, when it started tapping on the windows, I didn't feel scared, disturbingly more comfortable than I should have been. Tap, tap, tap. Every night, almost beckoning for me to let it in. The shadows, every day in that house, the shadows felt alive. They would move, and each day I swore I could see him, the one who kept watching, always watching. From the darkness, the man in the walls, tall, lanky, skinny, just pure darkness. He was who Lucy stared at. I saw him in the mirror, his eyes staring at me from the crack in the door. I could feel him wherever I went, but I grew attached to him, comforted by his presence. Always in the darkness, always watching, always, but I couldn't take any more of it. The tapping, the whispering, the screams, the watching. It got worse when he started touching me. At first, I could feel his breath on my neck, then a slight caress of my hair. But at night, the green room door would open, slowly, the creaks sending shivers down my spine. The footsteps would creak the wooden floor below them, slowly making their way to my bed. The cold fingers would run down my foot as the whispers turned to giggles. A week ago, I was trying to sleep. I could have actually slept that night, but the bed began to move down. It felt as though someone sat on the mattress. It felt right then, right there, the hatred, the terror. His labored breathing as he began to crawl on top of me and breathe down the back of my neck. Yesterday, I found my dad's journal in the attic. He talked about how the man in the walls wanted to kill him. I called my friend and told her everything. Something new happened today. Peace and quiet. No more eyes, darkness, nothing. Lucy followed me upstairs. My friend wasn't as lucky. She heard scratching at her bedroom door last night. She lives alone. She thinks that I gave him to her because I told her of him. My dad's journal says the same thing. If you tell someone about him, he spreads like a disease and collects you until he gets back to the original. I'm sorry.